There's going to be a one-day intro, so you'll be able to take your existing programming knowledge, use those skills to learn the ins and outs of programming in Swift. If you programmed in another object-oriented language and you need to get up and running with Swift quickly, this one-day instructor-led training course is the one for you. We're also running a 3-day responsive web development workshop, February 17th to the 19th. So that's a 3-day for developers and designers. That's $4.95 per person. And then we've got a 5-day Android programming boot camp coming up as well. That's March 23rd to the 27th, and that's $14.95 per person. So with it being in March, there's lots of time to save you pennies for that one. So great. So that's kind of what's coming up for the next little while. Just quick housekeeping notes. We're going to get going very soon with the wonderful Mr. Daniel Slack. But before we do that, just to let you know, help yourselves to coffee, treats, etc. We'll break at 8 o'clock. And the washrooms are down the hall. There's sort of one in this sort of kitchen-y area that you probably passed on the way. There's a couple of washrooms there. There's some further down the hall to your right. And then at about 8:30, we'll start with the question and answer, and I'll ask you all to fill out the evaluation form. And we'll be doing a door prize draw. Actually, we have 3 things that we're going to be running for. There's 3 iTunes cards that will be, one of them will be from evaluation, so make sure to fill it in and hand it in. And then 3 things, well, I don't know, that might be winning all 3 things, because I think you're the only paid up member here tonight. So you might win everything, right? So there's a Q camera, which is like a social media camera that uploads directly to any kind of social media site. And then there's iTunes gift cards. So anyways, without further ado, I would like to introduce your Daniel Slack. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody.
Hello? Everyone hear me? Perfect. All right. Okay, welcome to creating making apps with Angular and Ionic.
Just keep going.
All right. I guess first we'll start off just a question here. Who is aware or heard of AngularJS? That's a lot of people. Who has used it in some capacity? Okay, good. Ionic framework. Who's heard of that? And then used it. Okay, cool. All right, perfect. So this is geared towards you guys. Stop shifting here.
I'm just going to dance with it all night.
Okay, so first we'll start off just about me. My name is Dan Slack. My Twitter handle is @JavaSlack on the previous slide. I've been a software developer for the past 10 years, mostly enterprise data stuff, with a lot of web stuff mixed in. I'm a consultant, I'm a father, I'm a board gamer. I was introduced to Angular about 9 months ago, January. I was playing around with it, and it sort of went, enough doing to-do apps, let's jump in. And so I converted a scheduling component of our enterprise app and moved it over to Angular, and I haven't looked back yet for that. So it's been in production since February or March. I'm still using it every day. And I've worked with Ionic for the past 5 months. Nothing in the App Store yet, but I have 2 applications that are through prototyping and early development phases. Okay, so the agenda for tonight, I'm going to do an overview of AngularJS. I'm going to talk about the AngularJS components. And this is all for Ionic. I'll do a demo of an AngularJS app. We'll see how much time there is. I may kind of jump a little bit instead of doing my live coding, but I will show you an Angular app sort of in action and make some changes. Then I'll jump into Ionic, an overview sort of the different pieces of Ionic, what it is, the history, why it's here, why everyone should be excited about it, and I'll start talking about its components. It's about 2 major components. The first one is the CSS framework, which you can use without any code. which it looks really nice, lets you make some really cool looking apps. But the other component, part of it is extensions on top of Angular itself. And so I'll talk a little more into that, and I'll show you some code samples of that. And then, again, barring time, I will do a mobile application of the Angular demo app that I did previously, and then I'll finish up with some sort of final thoughts. Okay, so first I'm going to start with the caveat. So I love Angular. I've toyed around with Ember.js, which is another data binding system. It was really cool too, but once I saw Angular, started working with it, I loved it. Every time I work in a non-Angular environment, I think to myself, I could do this in Angular, it'd be so much easier. But the learning curve is not so much a curve as looking like this. So the beginning of Angular, you see what it can do, and with very little HTML and almost no JavaScript, you can do incredible things. Just things that would, in a jQuery world or any other frameworks, would take hours and hours to do. You can do it sort of like that, and then you go, this is awesome. And then you say, well, I want to do more. And then, why are we doing this? This makes no sense. This is insane. This is such a stupid framework. And then the light bulb goes off. Suddenly you're up on the next curve, and then you're down again, you're up again, and you're down. And this curve, I've been riding this for 9 months, and I'm still riding it. Ionic doesn't let up. There's still things that I'm learning, and I get frustrated, and I want to throw the computer against the wall, and then I'm back at it, and I solve the problem. So be aware that if you're doing Angular development, you're going to go through this. If you have a mentor, leave those values won't be as deep, but they'll still be there. The second thing I'll mention also about Angular is I'm talking about the basics of Angular. I'm not going to be talking about any more advanced functionality. There's a lot of really crazy stuff you can do with it. You can get pretty deep, and I'm not going to do that. I don't have time. That would be a full day or two sort of thing. Okay, so what is Angular? So Angular is an open source framework. It's sort of been developed for 5 years. It kind of hit critical mass a little while ago when it hit version 1.0. It's up to 1.3, I think that's the release candidate. 1.2 is sort of the stable one. If you're doing any Internet Explorer 8 work, if you're doing any enterprise work for people who still use that, and I'm one of those, 1.2 is pretty well going to be the version you have to stay at until your clients upgrade to IE9 and above. 1.3 stops support for IE8, and when they go to 2.0, they're going to drop that entirely and just go with modern web browser. So IE11, that's written in Chrome, Safari, etc. It's maintained and created by Google employees. I don't believe it is a Google product, but it is maintained by them. And it's what's called an MVW framework, where the W stands for whatever. There's MVVC, which is, or MVVW, model view model, and then there's model view controller and whatever else. And at the end of the day, it's whatever. It is what it is. It's a model view, and then that part you can call it whatever you want. One other thing I should also mention, I forgot to mention on the previous point, is so Google has their Dart language that they sort of pimping on, and there's an Angular Dart. And from what I understand, Angular Dart sort of has features and ideas and stuff that we're not seeing yet in version 3.1.3, but we will see it in 2.0, as well as a bunch of other sort of user projects that have been created. That will also see in 2.0. So it's no surprise that it's created by Google employees because they're using Dart. Okay, so the major parts of Angular. There are several parts, obviously. There are directives, and here I'm talking about the core directives. I'm not talking about the custom directives, which I'll talk about, I'll get to in a little bit. This is sort of the first thing you will see when you go to the Angular tutorial and Angular in 10 minutes type thing. This is what you're going to see right off the hop is directives. And then there's controllers, which is the glue between the model and the viewer, and lets you do all of the fun problem solving we love to do. A lot of Angular is what's known as a SPA, single page application. In single page applications, you're going to do a lot of routing, navigation. You have a list of, let's say, workouts. You click on a workout, you go to the details of the workout. Well, you've navigated from that to there, and that's routing. So it takes care of that for you, and Yeah, you'll see that. I'll show an example later. Last part that I'm going to be talking about is services. And services sort of are two things here. The first is there are a lot of services that Angular provides out of the box. There's the HTTP service, which if you're familiar with jQuery, is like their $AJAX call. They have location service. They have a timeout service. They have all these different services that they provide out of the box. And they're always prefixed with $. At the same time, we're going to be creating services. Right? For sure, we're going to be creating our own custom services. And the way you create them is essentially the exact same way that Angular does out of the box. So it's sort of a twofold thing here. Yeah, okay. So, all right, let's talk about the directives. Can everybody see that? Is that okay? No. No, not really. Let me see if I can make it bigger. This is the one thing I wasn't sure about. Well, lights. Yeah, sorry. I'm using a system called CodePen. I wanted to be able to embed source code and run it so you can see what's going on versus just static slides. So it's a little more exciting. But basically, directives are effectively Angular's version of web components. Web components are a W3C spec. It lets us describe sort of a widget in an HTML-like way. So, for example, let's say you're doing some editor and you want to have a color picker. There's tons and tons of color pickers that are out there, but all the syntax, all the HTML is a div and a div and a li and all this kind of funky stuff, and you have to throw on jQuery that does a bunch of magical things. Well, it would be so much easier if you just go color picker, a tag that says color picker, and then maybe you pass in the color red that you want to start with. And web components lets you do that. You define color picker, and then you define a code that actually does all the magical things, and it makes it so much easier to read. So directives are Angular's sort of version of that. Hard to see, I know, but this here, does that help? Okay, so that is a directive. Angular has element directives, which are tags, and they also have attribute directives. So by tagging this div with ng-app, we're telling Angular something that it can parse and configure and go, okay, I see what's going on here. So what ng-app is in this case is it actually the bootstrap for the whole application. It's basically saying, hey, everything inside of that div is my application. Okay, everything, what this means, by the way, is that you can embed Angular in other applications. You just provide a div, say ng-app, and then all the content in there is just Angular specific. The next one here, we have ng-init. This is usually used for demo purposes, hence why it's here, and it lets me initialize some variables. So I have is viewable true. I'm setting some items to be the name hello and name world, and I'm just setting those variables up. The next one we have is ngIf, which is an if block. Pretty straightforward. In this case, ngIf is a directive, and it looks at it and goes, okay, what do you want to do? The content of ngIf is an expression. So in this case, I'm saying is viewable, which is, in this case, a truthy value, right? In this case, it's literally true, it's a true value, but any expression that returns truthy will trigger that if statement. So if is trueable was, a variable as it is, as you can see it, that's what it is, but items, for example, I could have changed that to say items.length is equal to 2. And that would also return a true value. So you can actually do a full expression, or you can use functions. The last one here is ng-repeat, which is our loop. So what we're doing here is we're saying, for all the items that we have initialized above, let's move over them. And we're going to put the content into an item variable, or item object, that we can then reference. Now, what this looks like, it's not too exciting. It gets more exciting later, is that's what we get. That's the result of executing. This is actually executing the code. I can go to the code pen and actually look at it. But as you can see, it works. Unfortunately, I can't edit it here, but I can show you the result. Okay, so continuing on with directives. I mentioned earlier on about Ember.js and the data binding. Angular provides this thing called two-way data binding, which is sort of the first eureka epiphany moment that you have when you're working with these kind of frameworks. And in essence, it lets you sets in the data here, and it shows up here, and it interacts with each other. And again, thinking about the jQuery world, you have to do event handling and all that kind of stuff. And this is all it really is. Everything else is kind of the same. I've done a little bit of Bootstrap CSS just to make it look a little pretty. But the big thing here is we have an input and we have ng model, search text. So what ng model is saying is, hey, that is a variable that we're putting inside of our app. And this variable is going to change based on what I put into the input. And underneath it, I just reference it. So if anybody is aware or has used handlebars or mustache, it's a templating language, and the curly braces usually indicate some kind of variable, something that should happen here. And Angular uses this syntax. So this is saying output search text. Now the pipe there, that says uppercase, that's a filter, and I'll talk about that in a second. But the result of this is, can you see that? Okay, there's a little text box here, so we have search text. So if I type, welcome attendees. So you can see as I'm typing, the content is showing up underneath. Now, the way CodePen works here, this code editing software, is if I had JavaScript, it would have a JavaScript tag. And there is no JavaScript. There's no JavaScript going on here. Now, there's an AngularJS file that I've imported, and that's on the CodePen site, but I'm not doing anything else in here. All I've done is I simply said, ng model search text, let's output it. And that's it, and it knows to update one from the other. And there's nothing else to it. There's no other JavaScript, there's no other event binders. It's pretty neat stuff. Now, you also notice that it's uppercase. And that's where this part comes in here. So, as I said, notice search text uppercase. So all this is a filter, and I'll mention it now and get out of the way. There's a whole bunch of filters you can apply in Angular. In this case, it's an uppercase filter, lowercase, there's order by, date, if you want to do date formatting. And all it really does, and this is why it's kind of powerful, is it lets us change the look of our text, of our object, without actually changing it. So that means that a good example is a date. Let's say you have your date and you need to make sure it's in that ISO format, so that it keeps track of all the time zones and all that jazz. But you're not going to display that, of course. So typically what you do is you take that variable, you maybe format it, throw it into your page, and then you display it. Well, here, I would just reference that date and I go pipe, format it this way, right? And it's built right in, it doesn't change, doesn't destroy any data. So it's a really powerful thing, and you can make your own filters, which is kind of a neat thing. All right, so now controllers and scope. So controllers is the main way, as I said, it's glue. It's the main way of getting data to and from views. It's a relatively straightforward object construct. It's like a function, basically. What makes it kind of special is, first off, it provides what's called a scope object. And every single controller that's ever created is given a brand new scope object. And the scope object has some interesting properties. The first thing I'll mention is that scope, the entire ng app, the entire application has what's called a root scope. So it's one single sort of parent scope. Every controller that comes off there is off of the app. The controller scope extends from that root scope. So you actually build out a scope tree, right? So it means that when you come down over here, this scope for this controller is way nested down in this controller stack. This scope extends from that, and so on and so on and so on. So it's a really interesting tree structure, and where that comes into play is, well, a few things, and I'll get to that in a second. First of all, we have retrieve and store data. Simple scope dot x is equal to 4. That's setting it. Var x equals scope dot, my variable. That's a getter. But what's interesting about this is when you get to set data, if it's not in your scope, it will automatically go up and look at your parent scope. And you can actually look, it'll actually cascade up and look for that variable to see is it in my scope somewhere, right? Which is actually pretty powerful, especially if you want to share scopes. The other one is add helper functions. So earlier on I had isVisible. So isVisible was a variable. It could have also simply been a function. And in that case, I would have defined it on my scope, and it would have returned some truthy value. It could have checked the visibility of the variable, or there's all sorts of different things it could have done. So now where the parent-child relationship kind of comes into play, a little bit is here when we're watching. So scopes actually provide a function called watch, so we can actually watch when data changes. So that search text that I showed you before, I could have imagined a search text. Well, a simple extension of that is it's an autocomplete, right? Like Google does when you start typing and it shows the autocomplete results. So what I could have done with that is I could have added a watch on the search text. And once that fires, once that gets hit, once there's a change, I could have done an AJAX call, gone to my server, grabbed the results based on that search text, returned the results, pushed it onto the scope, and then boom, we could have had a list of suggested searches, right? And that's what a watch can do. So that's a really important thing. And actually, the little curly brace search text that I had on the previous slide, that actually is implicitly a watch. Angular is actually creating a watch on that variable for us visibly. We don't actually do it, but we can actually do it programmatically. They're doing it automatically, but we can do it programmatically. Oops. The last thing we can do is we can use events. Again, and now this is back to that tree structure. So, in jQuery and other languages we have, or just basic JavaScript, we can attach event listeners. So in Angular it's no different, except we do it on the scope. So we'd say scope.on update my list. And whenever that scope is told that there's an event that hits it that says update my list, it will fire an event, fire a function. Right? It will execute a function, which is pretty standard. Where the interesting part comes in is they also have two fire mechanisms, event firing mechanisms. So one is an emit and one's a broadcast. So broadcast is, I'm at here, broadcast to my children. So now that hierarchy of that scope and the parent scope and all that stuff comes into play. I have a scope up here, for example, a root scope. If I want to say, hey, I got a new message, I want everybody who cares, all my scopes, to know that there's a new message. You could broadcast that new message and it would just cascade all the way down. Conversely, you can do an emit. An emit is a child coming up. So that's a good one where you add a new item to a list and you say, okay, parent, I've added this. Emit the change, which is new list item, and it will emit up to its parent, and its parent goes, okay, I can handle this, and then I can take care of it. So it has a really good event handling system. Okay, so code. I'm only showing a couple of the important parts here. The watches and event listening is a little more advanced topic, but is that better if I highlight it all? Okay, I'll do that for now. Okay, so what I have here is I have a controller. This is again how you define it. Now the Angular.module at the top, that's just how you bootstrap modules. If it's the very first module, effectively it's the app. It is the main module. The square brackets there are module dependencies. That'll come into play a little bit later, but a good example of this is good practice to have your app code with all the routes and everything here, maybe a controller.js file, which has its controller module, and you may have a services module. Or if you have a big application, let's say you have blogs and friends, you may have a blogs/controllers.js and a friends/controller.js, and you can, that square bracket lets you import those modules. If you don't import them, it can't do anything with them, right? So now this is the controller syntax. Pretty straightforward. We have my controller. It's expecting a function. And then we have that $scope variable that is automatically created and pushed into this function. And all we're doing here is we're just saying my data value is equal to hello NMM. And we're creating a function here called reverse. And all that does is when that gets executed, all it does is essentially just reverses the string and shoves it back into itself. Okay, so it's just a simple reversal. It's pretty straightforward. So what the HTML of that looks like is now we have a new directive here. The new directive here is ng controller. So ng controller tells Angular the content within here, these three HTML elements, they are part of this controller. The scope refers to it, all that kind of stuff. So here we have an ng model, ng model, if you remember with the search text, is a way of telling Angular, hey, this is a variable I care about. Now in this case, I've actually defined it ahead of time. So in the scope, it sees, oh, there's a my data value. It's already in my scope. So you'll see in the result, it actually just pushes the value into it. The next we have here is we have ng click on the button. So this is kind of like on click. If you remember the good old day before we used event handling and all that kind of stuff. In this case, this is an Angular sort of on click event. It's a little more sophisticated. This doesn't immediately execute. Normally, if you do that in JavaScript type thing, it will immediately execute the function. In this case, it knows, oh, when you click this, it's going to call the reverse function. And you can actually pass arguments in there. I could have put reverse and then maybe pass in a number or integer or something like that, and it would actually pass along to the function. So it's a little more useful and a little more sophisticated than the standard on-click. And the last thing I do is all I do is just output my data value. So the result of this is here. So we have a whole LMM. So I'll update this and I'll change it to, welcome to my talk. And then, again, we have our auto update here, but now when I hit reverse, you can see that it actually reverses the code just on a simple click. And what's happening here is when I click this reverse, this function is being called, right? The reverse function is being executed. It's changing the data value by reversing the content, shoving it back into the scope of my data value, and Angular is automatically picking it up.
Is there any difference between using ng model and the curly braces, like in the HTML?
Yeah. Okay, so the curly braces is what's called a one-way data binding, I believe.
Okay.
And the ng model is the two-way.
Okay.
So yeah, exactly, right? Because I can't change my data value.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good question. So pretty straightforward. It's fairly straightforward example, but it does show you what you can do with relatively little amount of code. Okay, so routing and views. Okay, so routing is a little more complex. As I said before, we're going to have a lot of navigation in our apps, so we want to render into a single view. That's sort of part and parcel of how Angular works. They have a view model, a view div, all of the content for the navigation gets shoved into a view. So you can see this content here, which is a little more readable. This is not code dense, so that's why it's more readable. I have a header tag that says this is the demo, and underneath it I have an ng view. So what this means is every single time the view data changes, that header stays the same. It's outside of the ng view, so it never gets modified, but the content underneath it is. So you can imagine having a site that has a banner and everything, it never changes. You can put that outside your ng view, for example. I mean, there's other use cases for sure, but that's one example. And the actual JavaScript to sort of do a route, first of all, you can see here, we have ng route here. Now I mentioned to you before, those square brackets are for modules. Back, I think, Angular 1.2, they separated the router code out of the base part of Angular. Actually, they separated a bunch of stuff out. So now, if you want routing, you need to import the JavaScript file and include it as a module dependency here. So if you don't include that, your application is going to come a bit fall out. So that's beware. The second thing we have here is the config. So the config is basically, hey, configure some stuff before it hits the DOM. Let's actually bootstrap some stuff up. At this point in time, we don't know anything about the DOM, doesn't know anything about scope, doesn't know anything about that. Config just lets us get some stuff set up. So we have a route provider, which in this case, battery die.
Oh, okay.
Yellow. Anyone hear me? That's good. So, yeah. Okay. So anyway, route provider here, it is, well, simply the provider of the routes. I mean, it's a service, right? That's what it does. So here, what we can do here is we can say, hey, when we get slash, we want to load this template, which is an HTML file, and we want to load this controller, or use this controller for that template. When we go to slash page 1, we want to use the page 1 HTML. We want to use the page 1 controller. And then we have sort of a catch-all, which is the redirect to. So in this case, if you go slash XYZ QR4, it's going to just boot you back to slash. So it's kind of this catch-all to make sure, it doesn't kind of send you to weird places. So what this kind of looks like in code, highlight all that. Okay, so the code here is, again, that isn't different from what I just showed you, except these last two here. I'm actually defining the main controller and I'm defining the page 1 controller. If I don't define those, it's going to blow up and go, there is no page 1, there is no main controller. So I have to define it. I'm not doing anything fancy. Where the interesting part comes in here is we have in our HTML. So you can see at the bottom we have our ng view, which I showed you before. That tells Angular, hey, put all my code there. The rest is up here, again, using CodePen, I can't actually include off-site statics or HTML files. But what Angular lets you do is you can actually define script tags with the type of text ng template. And the ID is sort of the HTML file. It actually pushes it into what's called template cache and it stores it there. So it becomes, at the end of the day, no different than if we loaded an HTML file from the server. And this way I can kind of show you an actual example of how it works. So here we have main.html and it's an ahref, go to page 1. We have page 1, which says page 1, and then it goes back to main page. Another thing that's important here is kind of blurry here, but those are hash marks. Those hash marks are used by Angular to sort of do the navigation. So what that looks like here, it's pretty, nothing too fancy here. It just says go to page 1, when we click it says back to main page, we click, we go back and forth. So this is actually routing, and you can see it's kind of tough, this is really small here. That's really, really hard. Anyways, down at the bottom, the URL actually says pound or hash slash page 1. And here it says just slash. So that's a very, very basic routing for the application. Okay, services. So services, this is important is a good design practice. Not only does Angular provide services for us, if we make our own services, if we are going to, as I'm doing here, going to open weathermap.org, we shouldn't put that in our controller. First of all, it's not very good to be, it's not very easily testable. And second of all, it's just kind of looks bad. Embedding all your HTTP calls and stuff, it's so much easier to abstract it out to the service. And like I said, it's mostly for testing and clean code. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating a factory. Now, that factory is a service. It is one of a few services. This is the one I kind of like to use. There's another one called service. The syntax just changes inside. And the other day it does the same thing. I just like the syntax. So here I'm injecting and pushing in HTTP. And I'm returning an object literal here, which is get. So what happens here is this does an HTTP get, and it goes out there, and I've used Winnipeg's lat long to find 10 cities in this area, and we're going to grab the weather. Is anybody familiar with promises? Anybody familiar? Okay, yeah, okay. So promises are weird. I'll tell you that right now. If you're used to doing AJAX calls, usually use callbacks. So you say, here's my $.ajax get, and then you say success is this, and failure is colon this, it's a function. Promises kind of turn that on its head. What happens here is you do a get, and then that immediately executes. It doesn't immediately go to the server, but it immediately executes and returns something. In this case, it returns what's called a promise. It's a promise that it will do it. Don't worry, this will get done. It provides a function called then. So it says, okay, once this is finished executed, then run this next function. So in this case, it's going to run this function response. And now all I'm doing is just returning the entire promise back to my controller. So down here in my controller, first of all, you can see I'm providing saying, hey, please load this echo service. So based on the name here, and based on the name here, it knows to smush it together. So it knows to provide a version of the echo service. And Angular does that for you out of the box. I can simply say echo service like get, which executes this function. It returns that promise to finish, don't worry. And then I can just say, well, then once you're finished, please update my scopes results variable with the data that you come back. Okay? It works really, really well. It's a lot cleaner, I find, than what they call callback help, where you can have callbacks, and so on and so forth. It kind of alleviates that a little bit. And if you're using Angular, you have to get used to it, because that's just what big use. So, anyways, what does that mean? So, as I mentioned, here's the code, the HTML to do it. All I'm doing here is, again, my controller, this time using an ng repeat. So an ng repeat here, I'm going, the results we get back has the results I get back, I'm putting it to an object called city. And then all I'm doing is I'm saying city.name, and then going city.weather. In this case, the data coming back is an array, and then I'm just putting on the description. So if I actually run this, this should work. So what this is doing is right now to that web service. It retrieved all the areas within a certain radius around that Latin lock, which includes Winnipeg, so we have Transcona, Parkdale, and this is the weather right now. So a few clouds, not much different here. But yeah, so, and that's fairly straightforward to actually do something relatively complex like that. Okay, the last thing I'll talk about real quick, I'm not going to go into it, is custom directives. I mentioned it earlier about what custom directives are. They're really important. Mostly you use them when you need to do straight up DOM manipulation. If you're doing some of your jQuery table type stuff, shoving rows into tables, or doing some heavy duty basic DOM manipulation. Actually, that color picker would be a good example of that. A lot of DOM stuff going on. You would use a custom directory for that. You don't want to embed that into your controller. Again, it's not very testable. Angular out of the box is very good to be, has a good testability. Also, if you're making a reusable component, I have a navigation directive that does for date management. So if I go today, tomorrow, next week, whatever, I've used that in a few places. I wrote a directive for it, right? So to be able to reuse it. And then finally, for cleaner code. So here's an example of what a custom directive could look like. It's my-custom-directive. The content is some attribute that I'm going to shove some data into, in this case, some variable from scope. And what that would look like is this. It looks like kind of weird. The E here means it's an element. If it's A, it would be an attribute. Scope indicates the variables. And then template URL saying load this content from this HTML. So what's interesting is even from this you can see because it's loading full HTML file, you can abstract a lot of information, pull that out, and you can actually shove it into an HTML file. You can refactor it and make it just easier to read. So people can say, oh, I need a color picker, bang, color picker, instead of having to reinvent the wheel. Okay, so demo time. So would you say we have to 8 o'clock?
8 o'clock, do you want to, is this a good time to break right now?
Well, if for a demo, it depends on, I can show a quick demo for let's say maybe I can show 10 minutes and do something fast.
Yeah, whatever makes sense
and then
to you.
take a break and then I'll do the Ionic thing.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Okay, all right, demo. All right, I'm using Sublime. If anybody, I heard a woo-hoo somewhere.
Registered or unregistered?
This one is licensed.
Wow.
I know.
I've never seen them.
I've seen so many people not registered.
Well, it's I don't know. It's such a good editor. Yeah. Well, that's exactly it. To be honest, I've actually moved more and more to using WebStorm for a lot of stuff. But for basic edit, right, and I can adjust the font size so I can read it. Yeah. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is, let me open up the command window here. So I'm just going to show what I have so far. I'm not starting right from scratch, that would be insane. So, okay. So here, okay. Has anybody used the HP server before? It's a node system. Yeah. It's really awesome. You install it globally using node or npm g install HP server, and anywhere you are, you just go HP server and it starts up serving static files right from there. So
Watch changes.
no, not in this case, but watch means static files, right? So if you need to change the state, it's there, right? So for quick prototyping like this. Well, it kind of does, but it's not. It doesn't recompile stuff, right? Yeah. Okay, so here's our workload log. Great, nothing's going on here. Not too exciting. However, What we have here is we have an index file. I am loading a workout.js file. I had this idea for a workout log system as a demo for here today. So basically, I'm basing it kind of off of P90X. We have workouts, which is an array. We have the type of workout, which is legs and back. We have chest and back. And we're doing lots of back. Okay, whatever. So that's our workout file. I'm including that here. So you notice that the workout file is bar. By the way, can you move your names a little bigger here? Better? Okay, so bar workout. It's going to be it's a little very blind, it's bad, but just bear with me. It's faster this way. Okay, so the other thing we're doing is I'm loading a bunch of components. I'm using something called Bower. Don't worry about it. It's just a library management. I'm pulling in jQuery, Angular root, a few other things. Underscore, great utility library just to make life easier. And I'm pulling in my app.js controller services. Last thing I'm doing here is I have an H1 workout log, which will always stay there, as I mentioned in the presentation. My ng app called Angular workout, and I have the ng view. Okay, so my app. So I've done a couple of things ahead of time. So first of all, in my services, I've created a storage service. Now, all this is it lets me get and set values from local storage. It's nothing fancy. It's a service, so you can see that it looks like a service. It returns a get and set, but it just lets me manage that a little easier than doing it inside my controller. In my app, I have started off a very basic route provider here, which is loading a template of HTML and it's pushing it to the main controller. And lastly, I have my main controller. Okay, and there's nothing there, so nothing fancy. So if you look over here, like I said, you have workout log, and then this workout's history is from somewhere else. So where it is from is this partials folder. So here we have workouts and we have history. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do here is I'm going to start with making a service because we want to actually get that workout data, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a factory here and I'm going to call it workout. Let's call it workout service. And it's going to be just a simple factory, okay? What I'm going to do here is I'm going to, if you remember that workout.js file had workout and workouts, which is the array, right? So I'm just going to say, let's make a create a local variable called window.workout. I think it'll just workout. Dot workouts. Okay. I'm going to return my actual service. So I'm going to have a get, which is just going to return the workouts. Okay, which is just a simple array. For now, because we'll do this later, hopefully, I'm going to have an add function, and we are going to add in the workout. And all we're going to do here is we're going to add this to local storage. I'll get to that in a second. Okay, so we have a workout service. Now, if we go back to our controller, actually our home, you know, what do we want to do here? We want to show a drop down of workouts, right? I've worked out, I've burnt my legs and stuff, and I want to say, hey, I did this, you know, look at me, I'm great. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a drop down, so we can select the workout that we did. So all we're going to do here is we're just going to provide a select, right? We're going to push this into a ng model called data.workout type. The reason you go data.workout type rather than workout type is there's a whole big thing with Angular and its watches on primitives. And it has a tough time detecting sort of differences in primitives, so it's better to actually put all your data inside of sort of an object, and that actually bypasses a lot of issues that people run into. So we have that. Now, the next one we're going to do here is we're simply going to have the end select, and we're going to have an option here. And we're just going to put empty quotes here. And we're just going to say, please select a workout. Now it's tempting here without knowing anything about the API. The next question is, what do you do next? Well, I will use an ng repeat. Let's use an ng repeat to repeat all the options. And that's what I did the first time, and it's wrong. The reason it's wrong is the select is not just as simple as a list of options. I mean, I don't know how many people do this, but you know, create an option, you go, oh, okay, now, but somebody already selected one. So I need to do the current index thing and then select the thing, and we don't want to deal with that. So all we do here is we have an ng options, And the engine options, it's sort of for syntax. So we're going to go for workout in data.workouts. And we're going to go workout.name. Okay, so that's the label. The workout.name is a label, and then we're going to say for the workout in data.workouts. Now, one thing we don't have here, if I save this and I run it, it's going to fail for sure. Well, it does have a drop down, but nothing there. The reason there's nothing there is because in my controller, I haven't actually loaded the data. There's nothing there, there's nothing in the scope. Let's go back over here, and what I have to do is I have to actually inject my service, right? So my service here is workout data. Now, one other thing I mentioned is, you notice how I talked, earlier on I talked about Angular.module, this stuff here, right? And notice how I have controllers and services. So I'm loading those controllers, and I'm loading those services. Now it's good practice here to say, hey, my controller, you really need to load in the services, right? Just to make sure it's set. So we have, actually it's not workout data, it's workout service. Okay. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go scope.data, because we're wrapping inside an object, and we're going to say workouts equal, workout, get. Yeah. Okay. So now, well, we have something there, but it's not exactly. Let's see. What's the syntax here? Do I have to say? I think I have as. No. What is it again? Workout. Is it .name or no? Is it workouts? No. Great. Let me just cheat here. Look. Type. That's why. All right. So let's type.
I think you just add it as, and you just get rid of that as.
Just get rid of the as.
I mean, that's just what I see there. Try it if you want, but.
Let's try that. Ah, who was that? Good job. All right. Okay, great. So now we're actually selecting it. Yay, got the real data. So, great, we're selecting it, but we really want to add it, right? So let's create a button here. We're going to go ng-click. Let's go add workout. And now, what we're going to do here is just to save, from having to check, hey, did you actually select the workout? All I'm going to do here is I'm going to go if is data.workout type set. So if data.workout type is not set, we won't actually see the button. Right? Now, what's cool about ngIf is if I actually open up my dev tools here, is that it's actually not there. Like it's literally not in the DOM. If I select this and watch that, oh, there it is, right? There's the button. So there's ng show and ng hide, and those actually just toggle it. There's show hide display none type thing. This is actually, it removes it from the DOM. Okay, so we have this add workout over on controllers here. Let's actually add this function. Scope.add workout. Okay, and then all we're going to do here is in our workout service we have that add, right? And scope data.workout. Okay. In our service, I'm actually not doing anything. So I'm going to inject storage so I can actually add it to the system. And we're going to go storage dot set. Well, actually, since we're adding, this is a little different. What I have to do is I have to get it from the storage first. Right? So we're going to have a workout list. And what I want to do is I want to actually push the workout, and then I actually want to set the workout. Right? One last thing we'll do real quick is I'm going to just add a workout date to the data. the date we actually did one, right? Section, yeah, okay, so, good. The very last thing, well, actually, that's good for the add. So if we go back to our controller, this will actually add to history, and I can show you history in a second, assuming I did it right. The last thing we're going to do, though, is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to null out my workout type, so it resets the drop down, right? Okay, so let's see if this works. Okay, so legs back, hit add. Okay, so reset it, that's good. Now let's look at our resources here. Local storage, and there's our workout. Right, add it to history. Cool. I can add another one, do it again. But what's better than instead of looking at it and saying, hey, don't worry, add it to local storage. If you want to see your workout, go look at the resources. We're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to actually toss it into our history here. So our history here, what we'll do is we'll just do an LI. And we're going to do an NG repeat. And we'll go record in history. All right, record in history. And we're going to go record.type on record.workout date. Hit refresh. Oh, I'm not putting anything in history, right? So I'm going to go back to my controller. Let me actually go to here and actually load history, storage, get. We need the storage here, so that, finish. Okay. So there's our history record. So go ahead and add another one, it'll actually update if I refresh it. Now, two things. Well, go ahead.
No, I was going to say good.
Well, that's two things. First thing, this is really good. So let's do a filter. All we're going to do here is I mentioned the date filter. All you need is a date and then any colon after it sort of properties for that filter. So in this case, we're going to go. We're going to make it, let's say, MMM, so month, full month, day, go year, and we'll go hours, minutes, seconds, right? So there's the format, right? Changed for us. Again, data is not destroyed. That's all fine and dandy. The other thing I'd like to do really is when I add a new workout, I'd like to reset the history, right? So the simplest way, and I'll just do this for now, is once we actually add a workout, all I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, history, let's get that again. So if I go ahead and actually let's do chest and back this time. So let's see that it's updated. All right. Yeah. So now we can take a break, I think. I was going to, next step is to actually click on it and go to the next page, but that's okay. Another one.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Nat. So we'll take a quick break until 10 after, quarter after, definitely by quarter after. Just help yourselves to whatever you would like. Everyone, if you can make sure you have an evaluation that I handed out at the beginning, and then fill that out during the question and answer so that I can quickly collect them for the door prize drill. That would be great. So thank you very much.
Happy.
Yes.
After, are we, I saw the Ionic stuff, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was a premature, I could just, this could go downhill.
I'm glad that I was able to.
Did you come in all the way to the
Yes, but I went home, but I was right now that I just wanted to see this. I really have
Elena Gonzalez is here from Assiniboine Community College. She's one of the instructors there. And Elena is actually looking for some people to identify themselves as potential workshop instructors, and she can give you all of the details afterwards next year. So if you want to talk to Elena afterward, please go see her. Anyway, here we are. We're at round 2. Okay.
Yes.
So now, it will be over at 8. Yeah. We'll be out here by 9.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Okay, so I'll stay right on the top. This is going to be shorter than the previous one. All the other stuff that we talked about in the first presentation, the first part, is the foundation. So there's a lot of directives, there's a lot of controller talk, but I don't go over that anymore, right? Because everybody knows it. So we're all good. Okay, so Ionic. What is Ionic? Ionic is an HTML5 mobile framework. It is designed using AngularJS and Cordova or PhoneGap. And the big thing it does is similar to something like jQuery Mobile, where the whole drive is to create nice-looking HTML5 apps for the mobile space, looking like native apps. Ionic is trying to do that as well. Their difference, of course, is that because they've tied really heavily into Cordova, you're actually deploying hybrid apps versus just web apps, or it's be up to you to go ahead and work with Cordova to get all that working. So, about Ionic, it is developed by a company called Drifty. They make Codica and Jetstrap, which I never heard of until I wrote this slide, and they are Codica is a jQuery mobile drag and drop sort of creator, and Jetstrap is one for Bootstrap. That's important later on when I get to the last slide. It was launched last year, and it is native like mobile apps using AngularJS. And as I mentioned, the biggest part of it is that the PhoneGap support or Cordova support. I kind of use it interchangeably, but they call it Cordova. It's baked right into the tool set. And what I mean by that is, when you're initializing an application, first of all, it has a Node.js. Everyone's familiar with Node.js now, basically? Yeah? Okay. So it has a dependency on NPM, really, where you need to install it. And you install Cordova and Ionic both globally. I did a presentation here last year on Cordova. I think it was version 2.5 or 2.3, something like that. And now it's 3.6. A lot has changed. The biggest change that they have is what they call CLIs, command line interface. So you can do sort of your entire application management just on the command line instead of having to rely on third-party tool chains or build scripts or anything like that. And Ionic wraps that. It wraps around Cordova. So before Cordova, you'd say Cordova add platform iOS or add platform Android. In Ionic, you actually say Ionic platform, add Android, add this, serve this, run this, deploy that, or in this case, start. So it actually has a generator, a seed application. So right after you finish doing that, you can run Ionic, start, and then the name of the project, and then sort of the seed system. In this case, tabs. So this is a screenshot. That looks okay. It's a screenshot from the Ionic website. So you can see down at the bottom here, hard to see, but this is start app, my app, blank. So what that does, well, is blank, tabs, and then side menu. So that actually sort of configures that starter app, because those are kind of the common things. Either blank, which is you're going to take the ball and run with it and do whatever you want, or hey, we need tabs, or hey, we need side menus. And it basically constructs the HTML, the CSS, and JavaScript in such a way that you start off with, basically sample code. What you get out of blank, and really all of them, is you get a full project layout. So you will get your project JSON file, which does your node dependencies. You have a Bower JSON file, which manages your browser dependencies. You have a gulp file, which is a build system. You have all of the Cordova hooks folders, the plugins. If you're familiar with Cordova, there's all sorts of extensions to do things like globalization or accessing the camera. Those are all plugins that you add in. So it gives you the directories and the commands to actually import those plugin systems, plugins into the application. So that's sort of what okay, so the first component I mentioned way back was that there's two parts of Ionic. One is the CSS framework, and the other one is sort of their extensions. I'll talk about the CSS framework first. As I mentioned, it's a robust CSS framework. It comes baked in, so it provides, this is just a snapshot of what it provides. There's more on the screen. I don't want to just click on the API and go, here it is, here you go. It's kind of boring. Let's just take a snapshot of some of the major ones. So headers and footers, we have buttons, we have lists, we have cards, which is sort of a new one, and more. So what does it look like? So here we have a header. So we have our NG app, which you are most familiar with, but now there's no other directives here. What we have here is classes. So we have here the bar header, bar positive. Ionic, if anyone's familiar with Bootstrap, Bootstrap has in their button syntax, button warning, button danger, button success. Ionic is a little more chilled. It's are positive, are balanced, are assertive. It's not, but it's kind of just relaxed. I don't know why they did it. It's a little more aesthetically pleasing, I suppose. Anyway, so bar positive gives you your header, bar balanced, in this case bar footer, gives you your footer. So what does that look like? Well, it looks like that, which looks kind of nice. It's a nice header and footer. It's, as you notice, it's at the top of the page and the bottom, so it already takes care of that static placement of HTML at the top and the bottom, which is always going to be a pain in the butt. So for headers, we have buttons. So just want to show a couple more of their color schemes here. We have a bar called another header, which is bar energized. It's a really powerful logo. And in this case, so we have a content field. Before we had a header for nothing in the middle. So now we're defining content. So we say we have content, it has a header, and we're just going to add a little bit of padding. This is a utility class today, a CSS class they provide, which adds some padding to kind of push everything in. In this case, we define two buttons. One is button assertive, and one is button loyal. And the other one, the button assertive here, I'm actually providing, again, if you're familiar with Bootstrap or Font Awesome or any of those other icon sets, they have their own icon set. So Ionic has their own entire icon set that comes free of charge, and it's a pretty nice icon set. All right, so what does this look like? Looks like that. So there's our energize, and then you can see here danger, which is our assertive, and we actually have our icon spinning around there, and then we have fancy, which is sort of a royal blue or our fancy one. So those are the buttons. All right, so we have lists. The lists are always important. We all love lists on our mobile devices. Again, we have our positive or balanced header and a footer. In this case, now on our content, I need to specify, hey, I have a header and I have a footer. Now that's important because it needs to know how much to bump down. If you had subheaders, which is another thing that we can have, you need to indicate it has a subheader, so it'll bump down enough, do enough margin and stuff on the top to make sure it doesn't overlap with the header. In this case, I'm saying I want a unordered list, class of list, with a list item, angular phone. What does that look like? Looks like that. And it's tough to see at the top, but these lines actually go all the way across. And so from this, you can actually, I'm not doing any advanced things, and I can show you on the website later if you want to see some more detailed examples, but you can start doing things like wrapping this in an anchor tag, throwing icons on the far right. You can do badges, you can do avatars, you know what I mean? Just imagine what you can do. This is your standard list item, and it kind of goes from there. So we have cards. Now, I guess cards are big. I think Google or Microsoft or one of them decided to really push the concept of cards. And what a card is, I guess, is essentially just a chunk of information, a little header and footer, and some details about whatever it is. I've seen examples of cards where they use almost like an IMDb thing, where here's the name of the movie, here's the picture of the movie and some details and some summarization, and maybe a star rating we can start it, right? So use a card like that. So what it looks like, I'll show you that right away so you know what I'm talking about. That's essentially a card. So if I made another card underneath, you'd see this block would be another one, there'd be space in between, there'd be another one, another one, another one. Those are essentially cards. So to build a card, all we do there is we have a div. Now we're using divs. I think you can use ULs off the top of my head. I can use ULs, but class card, class item. The little gray is an item divider, and cards are typically used for headers. You can also use item divider in lists, which could be useful if you're doing a contact app, let's say, and you want to have all the person's contacts, and you want to say A, it's Adams and Andrew, whatever. And so the A would be that item divider, it would be a gray color, the B's and C's and so on. So you can use item dividers in lists as well. Cards are using it as headers. And then here we have an item, we're doing text wrap, so if I made this wider, we just kind of wrap the text. And again, what it looks like is thusly. All right, and there's more. So that's the last one of the CSS ones. And there's lots more I haven't talked about. As I mentioned, there's subheaders and subfooters. You can start nesting buttons, in the header and the footer. There's form CSS that I didn't talk about. So, your toggle buttons that we all know and love in our mobile device settings and drop downs, all that kind of stuff gets styled by the application. Okay, so now meat and potatoes, sort of the major part that Ionic provides that really makes our applications shine, our extensions. So there's lots and lots of widgets here, more being created all the time, and it creates this native-like apps. So the extensions here, the header and footer. I'll show you the CSS or the HTTP, the Ionic version of the extension for header and footers. It seems a little strange why we include this, but I'll explain that later. Modal windows, so modal windows, everyone know what a modal window is? A lot of shaking head, no, nods, yeah. Okay, you'll see one. Modal windows, they're useful for data. Action sheets, I guess this is an iOS thing, where you can do an action and a little thing comes up from the bottom and you can do edit or delete or something like that. So they have action sheets, they have tabs, they have side menus, which you saw 2 of those in that template window back there, and there is more. So header and footer. So header and footer here, first of all, you notice we have no div, class, bar header, bar item jobs. What we have now is we have a directive. And going back to the directives back in the previous presentation, they have a bunch of custom directives, Ion header bar, Ion content, Ion footer bar. At the end of the day, you end up with divs, honestly. But they're smart divs. They're intelligent. It's an intelligent header bar. And Ionic, can know, for example, Ion content, I notice I'm not saying it has header and it has footer. Ion content knows that it has a header because it can define the header up here. So it kind of communicates, if you will, between each other. So the header bar, you can still pass classes in there. As you can see, I have bar positive. In this case, I have a line title. So now instead of trying to apply some of my custom CSS to text the line left, but what if I have a button there? Do I need to bump it in a little bit? Do I do floats? You can just say a line title left, a line title right. Again, on the content, as I mentioned, footer bar, basically the same as the header. Not much of a difference. The thing here now is we have JS. So JS tags come into play. Not a lot of JavaScript. It's all it really needs. In this case, I'm saying, hey, Ionic app, it's my module, and I need that Ionic module. I need to pull that in now. And that's going to actually read all those directives. It's going to understand what to do with them. So you need that for this stuff. And so what does that look like? It looks like this. So we have our header, we have a left button, which I don't know if you saw that here. I didn't really talk about it. But they have buttons. I put buttons in the headers and the footers now. So now we have buttons, we have a header, we have a footer, we have a right button, a left button. So you can align them and you can do all that kind of stuff. So that's really straightforward with the headers. Now modals, okay, it's a little more fun. So I'm starting with JavaScript here. The JavaScript here is a little more involved. So here we have Ionic modal, which is a service or provider by Ionic, and we're injecting it, we're pushing it into the controller. Right away, we know we want a modal window. So we're actually going to create one, and we're going to store that instance inside of our scope. So here what we're saying is Ionic model. Let me highlight all this. So we're saying Ionic model, create an Ionic model from this template URL, mymodal.html. Here's some properties that we want to talk about or to push into that modal window. The scope, we want the scope to be created from this controller scope. If you don't specify that, it'll go against, if you remember that big tree thing I talked about way before, it goes to the main one, the top one. So it'll actually extend from the root scope, the one way at the top. And you can provide some animation, so it'll actually slide in from the bottom up, which actually makes it look pretty cool. And then we have our promises. Talked about promises before. Once this is finished, then run this function. And then all we do is we just set modal to our scope so our controller can actually use it, can actually do something with it. And where we do that is we have a function, the open modal, close modal. When destroy is called, we want to destroy the modal. So there's a bunch of different functions there. So what does the HTML look like? So HTML is pretty straightforward. The top part here is fairly self-explanatory. Again, now we have our ng controller, so that's coming into play now, specifying the controller we care about. And in this case, all I'm saying is I have a button that says open modal. Now the thing underneath is sort of the modal content. If you remember in the previous presentation, I had those two chunks of script tags that have HTML. I'm doing that here. So my modal HTML, that's my modal content. You specify a modal view, so it tells, when I click that button and open up the modal, it tells the modal window, this is how it should look, right? Because otherwise, you don't want things going over the edge of the div and stuff like that. So we specify a modal view, we specify our header bar, and we have our content that just says hello. So what does that look like? So left button, click, modal window. If anybody didn't know what a modal window is, that's what a modal window is. Grays out the background. You can't do anything until you actually leave this window closed somehow. So in this case, I can just click out of it. So you can see it slides down, slides up, very pretty and fancy. On certain mobile devices, what will happen is it'll actually slide up and it'll replace your screen because if you're using a tablet, it's different. If you're using a smaller mobile device, it actually covers it. So they actually change the functionality based on the screen sizes of relevant fonts. All right, so modal. Okay, action sheets. Again, we're starting with JavaScript code. I'm importing the action sheet service, which is going to let me actually build it. In this case, I only want to show the action sheet when I click a button. So when I go scope.show, I'm going to execute this function. I'm going to, I guess I'll highlight this so I can read it. I'm going to call Ionic action sheet. I'm going to show. So the Ionic action sheet, again, the API has all the options and all that kind of jazz. But what here we can say is here are some buttons. Edit, run, go to, directions, whatever. You can specify whatever you want. And then in general, I suppose, action sheets usually have a destruction action and a cancel action. So they provide those right out of the box, whether or not you have buttons. There's always, there's a destructive text. I think you can disable it by putting it to null, but you can provide destructive text. You can have your title text of your entire action sheet, your cancel, so I have a little cancel button. I'll show what it looks like in a second. And then we can actually act on when you click cancel or when you click a button. And the button, the index here, indicates the index of the button array. So now you can say, oh, if index is equal to 0, I want to edit it. If index is equal to 1, I want to drive there, or whatever. The HTML for this is dead simple. All it is basically just a button that says show with a header bar across the top. What does it look like? All right, so there's our action sheet. That's it. So now we have our edit. As I mentioned, it's a button across the top, and now I could have had more buttons. I could have had that go in different directions, run, whatever. The delete is obviously my destructive text, and then cancel is my cancel. So that actually slides out from the bottom of your device. Okay, tabs. JavaScript for tabs, by the way, that's all, there's nothing here. You wouldn't have JavaScript for your tabs. You would need to handle it. You need to figure out when you click through this tab, show this, do that. I'm just showing you what it looks like. So the HTML for this is we have our directive here, Ion tabs. We're specifying some class stuff. That last one there, tabs icon only. That means it's not going to have text, it's just going to be an icon. Pretty self-explanatory. Good CSS naming scheme they have. They have an Ion tab. In this case, we have 3 tabs. The first one is a flag construction settings. You can specify what happens when you click on, when you tap on the flag, or the tab that is, when you tap out of it. So the first one, it's always going to be a flag icon. The second one though, you can see here, first when it's on, it's a wrench. When it's off, it's a hammer. So you can actually sort of toggle that state a little bit, where, let's say you want to have a silhouette of a person, you tap on it, and then it becomes like, a dark color, whatever it is. So you can actually play around with that. So what does that look like? It looks like that. So we have all of our icons down at the bottom. These are all tabs. You can see the hammer. You click on it. Oh, it changes to a wrench. And back over. You can see our content as we click through it. So these are the tabs that Ionic provides. And again, it looks very similar, very iOS-y. Okay, side menus. Okay, so this is a lot of HTML. So sorry, but that's just sort of the way it works. This is JavaScript, again, dead simple, so I just want to show you that. So the way this works here is there's really two parts of this. The first one here is we're defining Ion side menus. So we're defining Ion side menus. And the side menu, think about it as two different columns. The left column, that column, is going to be your side menu that it's the hamburger thing, right? You swipe over and that. That's going to be your left menu, and your right menu is your content. So Ion side menu content is your right-hand side, right? So in this case, I'm just putting a paragraph tag for the main content with a bar positive across the top. And then I have my side menu. In my side menu, I'm actually saying, okay, the header is going to be left menu. I'm going to have content that has a list and a bunch of items, right? So it's really straightforward. Doesn't look like it's going to do much. But so here's our content. And then if I actually drag over, you can see that actually, there's our site. Right? And it's just HTML. Now, a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that we're not interacting with. One of the things that we typically would do is you typically have those little hamburger things, the 3 lines. You click on that to show it. Once a click event. So then what we need to do is we need to get the tab object and actually do a show. It becomes a little more programmatic. That's why I actually took it out. But the click and drag over, which is what I'm doing here, comes sort of free of charge, if you will. So pretty neat stuff. And as I said, there's much more. I didn't talk about popovers. I didn't talk about their sort of more form-related stuff. There's utilities. There's a sort of infamous thing with mobile where on mobile browsers where if you hit a button, like on click, it waits 300 milliseconds because it doesn't know if that's going to be a double tap or whatever. And so jQuery uses something called v-click to get around it. They have their own version of that tap. They've actually built it from scratch to sort of solve that. And there's a whole bunch of other sort of utilities that they provide to be able to get sort of different information. Okay, so the major differences from Angular is you're seeing probably a lot of things that, hey, this looks like Angular with a lot of directives. The main difference, the biggest difference, which is going to cause the biggest headache, at least it did for me, is Ionic doesn't use the base Angular router. It uses a community-submitted system called UI router. What the UI router does is it lets us define multiple views. So way back in Angular, I mentioned an ng view. One view, everything gets shoved into ng view. But you can imagine how you'd want to have more flexibility. You'd imagine you'd want to have a view here, a view here, a view here. You could update this, and then when this changes, update that. Do that. You can imagine that scenario. And what you have to do is you have to kind of work around that. So UI router gets around that. They provide multiple views so you can load content in. It also is stateful, so when you switch from one, if you are manipulating this view, you're changing, sort of navigating through that view, it'll maintain state as you pass through it. And it also allows for parent roots. So you can have a parent, a good example is actually tabs. There's a tab view that has all the tabs, and then each of those tabs is its own view. So it maintains the state between as you navigate through tabs. And this is actually the biggest hurdle that I had. I just recently was helping somebody move over a jQuery mobile app to Ionic, and this is the biggest headache. Everything else went super smoothly, and when I got to my view and router stuff and on multiple views, because I did so much Angular and not as much Ionic at the time, it took me a while to sort of go, okay, yeah, that's right. I remember how to do this now. So it's a big hurdle. Oh, forgot them down, okay. This is what the router looks like. Okay, so if you remember the route provider thing that I showed you before, it was only one or two. But this is different. First of all, now instead of this route provider, we have a state provider. And this URL route provider, I'm not using it, but it's that redirect to that I had. You know, if somebody went somewhere else, it redirects it. That's what the URL route provider gives us. So here we're saying we have a state called tabs. It's abstract, so you can't actually go to just /tabs. The URL /tab, and the template URL is tabs.html. Now these are essentially children to it. It's a child because of that first one, before the dot is tabs. So it knows, hey, I have a state called tabs. This one's tabs dot something, so it knows that it's a child. It knows that it's...
No, so the entire job is going to be loaded and bootstrapped and ready to go when you're at, is that?
What's that for the...
using Ionic.
Using the DOM doesn't have to... I don't know.
I'll ask later.
Sure, yeah, that's all right. I missed something there. That's okay. That's all right. Well, I know something. I got one more slide that's the demo. Yeah, so basically, in this case, if you go, this is a child of it, so the URL is not /home. The URL is actually /tab/home, because it's a child of that area, of that thing. So now what would happen is this tabs.home will push the content, which in this case is home.html, and it's going to shove it into the home-tab view. So I mentioned before we have those ng views. In these cases, these multiple views are named. So we actually have a named view. In this case, it's home-tab. That's a view that we will shove data in as we navigate from this tab. And if we move somewhere else, we go to a different tab, we'll actually update maybe a different set of views. It's very powerful, but it gets a little confusing, especially when you go from basic Angular routing to this. And I found their project home was really difficult to read. I don't. Anyways, all right. So demo. Now do I have time to do?
2 minutes, and if everybody can complete their and start handing in their evaluations, that'd be great.
I could just show you the finished Ionic app. Yeah. All right, let's do that. Okay. Instructions on the corporate. All right, so here's an Ionic app, all done for us. If you remember our other application we had the select box to select our workout type, and on the other side we have the history. So I kind of extrapolated and expanded that, so let's make an Ionic version of it. In this case, we actually have our workout and our history. So if I go ahead and select the workout here, and I click add workout, what happens here? Yeah, so now we go to, unless I miss the workout. Okay, there we go. So what happens here is you can see the URL at the top, right? /nav/tab/workout/nice and back. So that actually is a URL. So if I click back for a second, you can see our URL at the top is tab/workout. If I go to workout, if I go to history, it's tab/history. So if I go back and select my workout here. So in this case, we're actually going to put in how many different that we did, right? And we can actually, I realize I don't know how to save that, so that's always good. What we would do here is, you can see that we've done this navigation now, we switch back, and the important thing you notice here, and I don't know but there's a back button now, right? If you go back here, to here, we have the back button, but when I've navigated to the next page, this is the child, right? We actually have the back button. So it actually sort of knows your history. It's actually a stateful scenario, right? And essentially, yeah, this is essentially an Ionic version of it.
Could you resize it to like a craft or a phone size?
Sure. This one. Yeah, no, this one here. That's it. Regulation. Item 5. Refresh it. So it does, yeah, it does resize it. And then, of course, there's a drag, right, the scroll list. I don't know if you see it, but I'm sorry, guys. But yeah, that's essentially it. I did actually deploy this to a device at home. It's on here. The very last thing I will mention real fast, we'll go back to the next one. Very last slide here, I just wanted to mention a couple of things about Ionic. There's a lot of new components being added to Ionic. Side menu, they actually added a static side menu, so if you have a tablet, you always want that sidebar to always be there on a wide screen, but when it goes portrait, you want it there. They added that. They have keyboard, for keyboard handling, event handling for that, to sort of tell the phone to be showing the keyboard. The other projects from Ionic, which are pretty cool, one is Icons, which I mentioned before, which are Ionicons, I guess it is, which is their icon set. There's NG Cordova. NG Cordova is all the Cordova extensions, and they've wrapped in Angular sort of syntax. Ionic Box is really cool if you ever have a problem with deploying to Android, where it's essentially an image that you download and you load up using, I think it's a Vagrant image, and it loads up using VirtualBox, and it actually has Android pre-installed with Ionic and Cordova ready to go. The last one is Creator. It's in beta, and it is a GUI, drag and drop, GUI to build an Ionic system. So thanks for listening. The slides are there, code is there. Done.
We're going to be adding another service to one where they live